What incident from your life, you still cannot explain, although you have been replaying it in your head for 1,000 years? Time. And this is the 20th part of the Inexplicable stories from Read It. Once again I thank you for your support, for your kind words and for donations, also for the fact that you continue to brew coffee cocoa tea. And I will continue to tell you enjoy watching. Let's go.
I was sitting in the 8th grade, and suddenly I was seized by a strange, overwhelming feeling. I burst into tears right in class. I was sent to the principal's office. I called my mother to pick me up. And she agreed, because I never missed school and never caused trouble. My father was I've been sick for most of my life, so I just drove home, climbed onto the couch where my dad was sitting, and we started. Watched some documentary about World War II. Then we fell asleep. I woke up a few hours later, holding his hand. I turned to look at my father. I realized that he was dead. I sat there for a few minutes in absolute shock before going and telling everything to my mother. Even after all these years, I can't explain what I found myself when I was in class. But I just realized that I urgently needed to go home and that nothing should prevent me from being with my father that day. No one believes me, but this is what happened. When I was in college, I shared a room with a friend from high school. One night I was sleeping and had a dream in which he and I were on a huge pile of garbage and looking for something. We both rummaged through the garbage. Then I woke up. I got up and went to the bathroom. As I climbed back into bed, my roommate began to stirring in bed and muttering, "I found it here." And then he rolled over on the other side and fell silent again. On the next morning he remembered nothing. I didn't dream of getting out of bed, and I certainly didn't dream of his answer. My father worked for many years in the rescue service on a helicopter. One night I had a dream about a helicopter crash. And when I woke up, I was too scared to call my dad because I thought I would have a panic attack if he didn't answer. Then my phone rang. It was my father. He said, "I don't know if you've watched the news, but I wanted to let you know that I'm fine. One of his company's helicopters crashed. An orderly, a nurse, a patient and a pilot were killed. He was supposed to fly that shift on that helicopter, but for some reasons, it was replaced." It wasn't until years later that he told me that he had also dreamed of his crew that night. Not a wreck, but that they were at some kind of press conference, and he turned to talk to one of his own colleagues. But when he turned around, he saw that they were all dead. To this day, I am surprised that in the same at night, we dreamed of the horror associated with his work. And this was the day before that tragic crash. To this day, I am frightened by the horror of this dream. My late wife, who at that time had recently been diagnosed with epilepsy after a traumatic brain injury, took into the bathtub, and I was listening to the song Zeppelin in my time of dying. At the hour of my death in headphones. I listened to the music very loudly. Suddenly I had a very strange feeling. As if my wife needed help right now. I ran to the bathroom and found her lying face down in the bathtub. She was convulsing. Her face was underwater, and I pulled her out. I can't explain how I knew she needed help. Even if she was screaming at me and I somehow could do it. To hear, the music was too loud, so it's impossible. I still feel like I heard her thoughts. This reminded me of the story of how a car with a mother and her child fell off a bridge into the water. Rescuers arrived and heard the screams of a woman. She shouted that her child was in the car, that he needed to be saved. They pulled out both the child and the mother's body. She is drowned. In short, the examination showed that the woman died before the rescuers arrived and ambulance staff Therefore, there was no way she could shout to them, but they all heard her screaming anyway. I found a wet handprint on one of the rugs in my bathroom. I live alone, and guests have not come to me for a long time. 2. Besides, my hand was too small for that big print on the rug. My mother and I had a similar case after the death of my grandparents. She and her sisters were renovating their a huge house that is located deep in the forest. And one night my mother and I were there alone. She painted the walls in the bedroom, and I was doing something else on the other side of the house. The floor was covered with construction film for protection. Mummy. I painted the wall opposite the door, so for some time I stood with my back to the room. When she turned around, there were dirty bases and footprints on the floor behind her. She swears that the film was only laid when I came there. The footprints were very large and could not possibly belong to my aunts or hers, as they all had quite a few small feet, and they wore shoes while working. She called the builders, who helped them with more serious repairs, and asked if it could be one of them. Maybe one of them was in the house right now, and she asked why he was walking barefoot. The man on the other end of the line said only one thing: leave immediately. To this day, she has no idea where she came from. These traces were taken. Later we learned that this house was built in the style of an Austrian castle, although it is an ordinary house, as if from the Great Gatsby. It turns out that more than 100 years ago it was owned by some old and rich man who, in short, came off mind in this house. I don't believe in spirits or ghosts, and my mom and grandmother said they felt someone's presence in this house. I remember there was one room in which no one, not even adults, wanted to sleep because it was terrible. Unpleasant feeling. But I still want to know who left those traces. Something similar happened to a friend of mine, although this story is not exactly inexplicable, although at first it is so. He always had that feeling in his house that things weren't quite where he left them, or a little out of place. It happened quite often, but he was sure that he was just imagining it. He didn't turn like that. A hose in the backyard. Well, maybe he just put it in the wrong way. And he himself turned around on the ground. Why? Is the kitchen knife lying here? Maybe he took it and didn't think about it? Maybe at that moment he was thinking about something else. He never left his underwear in the corner of the bedroom. But maybe he just accidentally threw it there when he was drunk. And sometimes he swore that a steak was missing from the freezer. But it seemed to him that perhaps he had bought fewer steaks. Then he thought. It is quite logical that he did not remember everything quite accurately. After all, he spent a lot of time in his house. Girls. She lived about an hour's drive from his home. He could not appear at home for 2 to 3 days in a row. So, it is already. For several months I lived with this strange, vague feeling. And he even thought about moving in with his girlfriend, because everything became more serious. Also, his girlfriend did not like to be in his house. She was always paranoid. Someone is watching her. One day he came to his girlfriend for 3 days, and a neighbor called him. The neighbor said, "You've been gone for a long time. At home. Your friend Jason said he'd look after the house while you're gone. He's such a cool guy, you're very lucky to have him." My friend is like, "What do you mean? I don't have any friend named Jason. No one lives in my house except me, a neighbor." "Oh, no. I'm constantly talking to your friend Jason. He made us steak for dinner last night. He even watered my plants. Such a good guy." A friend of mine called the police, and sure enough, it turned out that this guy named Jason lived at his house while he was with his girlfriend. Jason cooked, cleaned, and even wrote in his diary. My friend My friend discovered this diary only later. It turned out that Jason was chasing my friend because that my friend's family is engaged in politics, and persecuting people who have security is actually very difficult. Also, this Jason took girls to my friend's house and wore his clothes. The cops arrested Jason, but it turns out that breaking into someone else's house without stealing anything is simply illegal. Penetration. As a result, he received a couple of months in prison for doing this for a while, but now he is free. And my friend swears he sees him sometimes. So much for a nightmare for the night. I posted this story yesterday in another thread, but I think it's appropriate here, so I'll leave my story here in the second time. It happened a few years ago when I was working the night shift in a bakery. I was going to work on a wooded path that opened onto a wide lawn. One night I noticed a small flickering light in the distance. From curiosity, I left the main path and walked across the grass to him. Coming closer, I saw what it was. In the middle of the field, there was a miniature dollhouse, inside which candles burned. Their light came out of tiny windows. I froze on moment, confused, not knowing what to do with it. Especially considering that candles, don't burn forever. It means that someone has recently set them on fire and put a house here. I looked around, but saw no one. In the end, I turned around and continued to go to work, but this picture stuck in my head for a long time. Nothing special happened. I just still don't understand how he ended up there and why. It's just strange. I didn't date a guy in college for long. One evening I went to his parents' house. When I arrived, they said, "Oh, hello, Andrea." My name is not Andrea. They apologized, and we had dinner. We chatted a little and that's it. After dinner, we are sitting in the living room, and I notice a photograph on the mantelpiece. I'm on it. The guy I'm dating and his parents, all on the golf course. Same haircut, same style, same hat. Only I've never played golf, I've never met them before. It was in the early noughties, so it's definitely not photoshopped. The guy sees me looking at the photo and says embarrassedly, "Oh, yes, that's my ex Andrea." At that moment, I was ready to believe that she was my long-lost twin sister. The most wild thing is that we met him quite by accident. It was the first time we had seen each other at a charity auction, so he definitely didn't meet me just because I looked like him. An ex or something like that. In general, after a couple of weeks he left me, and about a month later I saw him with Andrea at the grocery store. It was just wild to look at my doppelganger in the vegetable department. One day, when I was about 17 years old, I was driving home with friends, and everything on the street, including the car, suddenly went dark. How? As if there was a power surge, and the lights went out everywhere. All the lights in the car also turned off, the entire instrument panel, and so on. I understand how this could have happened outside the car, but inside everything went out too, the radio and even the headlights. It was strange. It happened to me when I was alone on the beach during the pandemic. It was about 1 in the morning, and I was going to go to the tent to sleep. I reached out and gathered my things to get up and lie down in the bed, when suddenly all sounds seemed to disappear. But before I knew it, the whole world around me went dark. Then that's it. Collapsed. This happened quite quickly. It was a quiet, dark, empty beach in the middle of the night. But the complete absence of even the light of the stars and the moon made any sounds and sensations dazzlingly bright. I stood in complete shock for about 30 seconds. Just to get my bearings, and then another minute wondering what the hell just happened. It didn't collapse. Only light and sound, wind, sand under my feet and drops of water on my skin ceased to be felt. I don't know how. It is correct to describe what I experienced, because I do not consider it something supernatural. I don't believe in every. But at that one moment on that beach, at that time, for some reason, I felt complete lack of existence. I didn't tell anyone about it, because who would believe it? So I convinced myself that she probably died for a second and just hid this story deeper in her mind. If I wanted someone, I would not be able to fully describe what happened to me. After all, this crap was beyond my understanding. My wife, then a girl, and I lived in our first apartment. There was a strict ban on animals in the apartment. But there was a stray cat on the street that my wife had to take with her. She felt very sorry for her. One night I was sitting on the bed, and the cat began to scratch the carpet in the bedroom near the corridor. My wife heard the sound and rushed out of the living room down the corridor, screaming at the cat. As soon as my wife appeared in doorway, she raised her hands to clap her hands to scare the cat. But it did not slam. I saw her hands freeze in the air. The cat ran away and my wife stopped in the middle of the cotton. About a full second later, there was a loud, unmistakable bang down the hallway. We both heard and froze. She immediately looked at me, turning pale with horror. I didn't clap. That was almost 20 years ago, but this case still gives me goosebumps. Interval between measurements was very thin. You've heard the clapping of the rest of the other dimensions, where she clapped her hands. Reminds my story. I used to live in an old Victorian house built in 1862 with a friend, and we lived there. Only the two of us. The house was built in the house style, so the bathroom was at the very end, and in order to get there, I had to go through all the rooms and the kitchen. One morning we both woke up. It was quiet outside, morning was calm. She went to the bathroom, but left the door open, and I went to the living room next to the front door. Suddenly, clearly, and very loudly, I hear a man's voice. Look what we have here. Right in front of his nose. I was in shock and did not answer. And my friend asked, what was that? Or did you say something, because she heard it too? This is from the other end of the house. I said no and explained what had happened when she returned. Until now, it is one of the most strange mysteries that I happened to face. It was so obviously strange that I didn't even I believe it, and I wouldn't have believed my hearing if my friend hadn't heard the same thing. The TV wasn't working, and we weren't using our phones at the time. And in general, they were not with us, since we had literally just woken up. I still can't explain it. One day, when I was 7 or 8 years old, I lost a ring that my grandmother gave me. She didn't die, she lived very far away, and I missed her very much. So when I lost him, I was hysterical, looking for him all day. And she cried until she went to sleep, because she could not find him. The next day I found him right in the center of my bedside table. Of course, I was overjoyed and thanked my parents for finding him. But they didn't understand what I was talking about. They said that my brothers must have found it. None of my brothers found rings, and I doubt they would have bothered to look for it. They wouldn't care. Plus, they all fell asleep a lot before me, because I cried until late, and I sleep quite lightly. I always wake up if someone comes to me in bedroom. Even if it had been my parents, they had no reason to lie or hide the fact that they had found it. Ring. I never found out who gave it back to me, but I still have it. I worked as a paramedic in Louisiana. One morning, I called work. It was Friday and I needed 3 days weekend. My boss agreed to give me a day off. She even told me, enjoy life before work for me. It was about an hour's drive, and almost every day my girlfriend and I drove the car together. That Friday, getting dressed for work while I was lying in bed, and some languishing voice in my head was telling me what I needed to go to work. I brushed off that voice a few times, but it got louder and louder to work. I gave up. And I told the girl that I would still go to work with her. We are driving along the A55 highway, over the bridge over the swamp, where a lot of cars. There is no curb, only pockets for the car and fences so as not to slide into the water. Congresses only every 7 to 10 miles. We've been driving for about 20 minutes now, and I'm starting to speed up. The limit was 70 miles per hour, but because of how remote it is, I usually drive around 85 miles per hour. I'm going in the fast lane and notice that a van without hazard lights has stopped on the right, just parked. It's strange, people constantly break down their cars here, or they have run out of gas, because this is a very long stretch of road without exits and gas stations. So I see this van. And between the van and the fence, I notice someone doing something to someone. Artificial respiration. I immediately stop and tell my girlfriend to call 911. I walk up to the van and I tell the guy who does CPR that I can help. He tells me that his friend has just been discharged from rehab and has relapsed. He injected something. I inspect. A man on the ground, I feel the pulse, he is not breathing. I've often run into junkies at my job, but usually it was in more comfortable environment and with a bunch of drugs in our ambulance. That day I had nothing with me. I did mouth-to-mouth breathing for this guy for about 15 minutes until I arrived. A policeman with a special substance for such cases on Laxon. By the time the ambulance arrived, the guy was already conscious. As I said before, I have worked with similar situations many times. And all this time, as I pumped him out, I remembered the voice in my head demanding that I go to work. If I hadn't called and did not go to work at his usual time, it would be too late. The guy would be dead. Something was talking to me, I don't know what exactly, but I wish it would talk to me more often. I would like to hear this voice every day. When I was in college, I loved to stop by F Guys to eat before work. I had a pretty clear daily routine. I went there at about the same time and always went to the toilet right before you leave on your way to work. The toilets were at the end of a long corridor at the back of the building. There was a male and a female one. There were 2 locks on the door to the toilet, a handle and a chain, which always seemed strange to me. In general, I was there once, and it was pretty empty. I went to the door and tried to open it. It began to open, but then caught on the chain. I immediately rolled down the door and said, "I'm sorry." I stood there for a second, wondering who the hell could lock the door only with a chain. As I stood there, I didn't hear anything. No answer, no reason why you opened my door. Which, in my opinion, was strange. I really needed to go to the bathroom, so I knocked gently. There is no answer. I began to think. I guess some small kid came out of the toilet and deliberately locked the door with a chain to mock people. A child's hand could easily crawl through the half-open opening and close the door with a chain. A minute later, without hearing absolutely nothing, I slowly open the door as wide as the chain allows. I see the toilet in the corner and the sink in the mirror. What was on the left, I could not see. I don't see anyone at all, but that's it. I politely ask, "Hey," a couple of awkward seconds. I don't hear anything. I saw 3 of the 4 corners of the bathroom room, so I thought that my guess about the small thing that I locked the door with a chain for fun was confirmed. Somehow I take off this chain and open the door. Finally, I will be able to pee and run to work. At the very moment As I climb into the bathroom, a damn hand reaches forward from the only corner I couldn't see and lowers water in the fucking toilet. I jumped out of there as damn fast as I could. I ran to the door and did not stopped until he got to his car. I haven't returned to that FG guys for a very long time. Still not. I can understand who the hell is silent in situations like this. What was that creepy stranger thinking? And, guys, thank you all for watching. If inexplicable stories have happened to you, then please write in the comments. Of course, watch the other parts. There are so many of them, if you haven't seen them yet. In general, thank you again, do not get sick, health, success, good luck and bye-bye. So long.